We often talk about tubeless tyres as giving the best all-round off-road performance for a mountain bike for a few reasons. Firstly, you're removing the weight of an inner tube from that tyre and replacing that with some sealant. That sealant patches up small holes whilst you're riding, and of course there's a decreased chance of damaging anything by running at lower pressures. You're not really going to get a pinch puncture, which would happen with inner tubes. However, they're not invincible and you still can get punctures, and this is how you fix them. Now, there are a few different ways you can actually patch up a tubeless tyre such as this one here. The very basics you're going to need is a tubeless repair kit. So that involves having, there's a little reaming tool for reaming out the hole and make sure it's big enough to apply one of these little tubeless plugs, often called ropes or slugs and stuff like that. They're basically a super sticky soft rubber compound worm that sits on this prong and you effectively stab it into the hole. Now, you often see racers using things like this because it's a really fast way of plugging that hole and getting back on the trail. But they don't make a permanent fix when you use them on their own. So we're going to show you a few other techniques for making it a bit more of a permanent fix. And to do that, you're going to need to build yourself your own little kit that will suit you based on these, combined with some vulcanising solution from your other puncture repair kits, and even some bigger rubber tyre patches. Let's just talk a little bit about the types of puncture you're likely to get with a tubeless tyre. Now, in extreme cases, you can split the sidewall, and if that happens, then it's a totally different fix. If that happens when you're on a trail, it's pretty much game over, and you're going to have to put an inner tube in there. So we've got a really cool fix for that coming up later in this video. But the day-to-day ones you're likely to get will be on the main tread of the tyre, and they'll be from small sharp things, be it little bits of flint or rock, sometimes sticks and brambles, thorns, anything like that that can penetrate that casing. And what tends to happen is they will actually come out as you're riding, leaving an exposed hole. Now, the beauty of the tubeless system is all down to the sealant that you use with it. So the tyre itself will seal, and you can set them up with no sealant in if you really wanted to, but the sealant is actually the key to the system. So this particular one is a latex style solution, so it's quite a milky solution and it's got rubber particles suspended, like sort of floating in that stuff. Now, with centrifugal force, it sticks to the outside of the tyre, so basically as you start getting those small punctures, the actual liquid part of the sealant acts as a carrier and gets those particles into the hole. It then congeals much like blood platelets would when they're congealing, like to form a scab. It's exactly the same process. And of course, there's differing sizes of holes, and you can see that this will only take effect on smaller holes. So with the small holes, I'm actually going to show you what happens and show you how it actually seals the job, because you will notice from time to time little white specks around your tyres, and that is just a sealant doing its job, sealing those little holes on the go, the sort of holes that would have had you sat at the side of the trail getting your inner tube out and fixing it. Now, depending on what type of sealant you have, the amount that you put in your tyres and the conditions you ride in, i.e. a hot climate or a cold climate, your sealant will naturally dry up after a while. Now, there's a few on the market that do claim that they will never dry up, but typically the more effective ones, like the latex based ones, they do kind of have a sell-by date because the nature of them working means they will dry up. So before you actually go worrying about all those punctures, you're going to need to make sure you stay on top of the sealant in your tyres. Now, generally you can hear it sloshing around a bit on the inside, and if that's the case, you can just monitor when you're not hearing that anymore. It's probably time to add a bit more in there. You can obviously manually check by removing part of your tyre and actually having a look inside there, and of course that gives you the opportunity to put some fresh sealant inside. Now, I actually personally prefer to inject straight in through the valves. It's a bit less messy, and I do tend to replace my sealant or top it up a couple of times a year, just as a routine thing, especially as you've had quite a warm season. Now, I'm just going to remove my valve core here and just demonstrate to you how easy that process is, especially actually with these valves. These are the meal kit valves. They're also used by DT on their wheels now, and part of the system is when you remove the core, you don't lose your tyre pressure. So this is quite cool. You literally inject straight into the system there, don't lose any tyre pressure, put the core back in, good to go. So I just want to simulate what would happen if you ride along the trails and you do get a small puncture. So I'm just going to use this little pick here just to puncture the casing of the tyre. And as I pull it out, you'll probably see a bit of mist. I'm going to give it a spin round and it will hopefully seal that up. Bit of a mist there. There we go. And as you can see, there's just a little blob of white latex there, as it's been forcing the particles through to congeal it. Now, as you continue riding, that becomes a bit more of a permanent fix on there, and it will just continue to seal that hole. Now, there's various different sizes of the rubber tyre plugs you can get on the market, ranging from super thin, which are actually excellent, these ones, because they do deal with most holes, slightly bigger, and then the huge ones you tend to get for motocross bikes. You may as well get selection because they're going to suit different size holes, but you're going to find it's going to be the smaller ones you'll use most of the time. So it's always worth having a couple of these set up ready. Have the small one and have a medium one. Keep them in your puncture kit, in your bag, in your bike, somewhere easy to get to, so if you do have to do this out on a trail, easy to jab in and continue riding. Now, I'm obviously going to have to make a bigger hole in order to use these, so bear with me a second while I do that, and I'll demonstrate to you just how effective they are. So picture this, you're on the trail, you've got this hole that your tyre sealant is not doing the job, quite a lot of air escaping from it, so you need to find it pretty quick. And then the idea is you stab this straight in the hole at the side of the trail, and it plugs that hole immediately. So you have to do this once and you have to do it well, but it's quite hard to get these in. So push it straight into the hole of the tyre, and then carefully pull out the applicator fork, and there you go. That is a plug successfully into the tyre, so that has plugged it completely. You don't want to just ride off with it hanging out because it's going to catch itself somewhere. So ideally you want to have a small knife with you on in your trail pack, and just cut this down. Obviously careful not to cut your casing or anything. And then you can just give the tyre a few spins just to make sure there's a sealant plugging this from the inside, so we know it's just going to really do its job well. Now, that's good enough in a race situation to get going back on the trail. Literally you can stab it straight in. And in fact, there's some really handy versions of these kits on the market. So the Dynaplug ones come in an aluminium case, and they're preloaded at both ends, and it's a good sort of item you can keep in your hip pack, in your rider bag, or even in a pocket, because it's not a sharp item. Pull the lid off, stab it in, hit the trails. So really good for race situation. There's also the samurai sword ones, which are bar end plugs, with one of them will be like a holster to hold the spare plugs, and the other end has got the applicator in it, so you unscrew it, bang, in it goes, hit the trails. Now, there is a few problems with this sort of design product. Now, it does do a quick fix, but it's never going to be a good permanent fix. Don't get me wrong, I have ridden with these for quite a few months on some tyres, but eventually they do tend to get pushed out by the tyre pressure on the inside. So if you can and you have the time, you want to cut this rubber fairly flush, and then you want to put some vulcanising solution on the outside here just to help it bond and stay in place. That's a really good way of making it last longer, and you're going to get a few more rides out of it. But the best bet really is something you want to do when you get back to home. Now, you want to remove the tyre from the bike completely, get that tyre sealant out of there, maybe put it in a bowl so you can reuse it afterwards, clean the inside of the tyre, and then you want to patch up the inside of the tyre with a proper tyre boot, exactly where this bit is, load the vulcanising solution and put a fresh load on the outside here. Now, I quite like to use shoe goo on the outside. This stuff's commonly used on skateboard shoes. You put it like on your ollie foot so you don't wear out the sole and the sides of your shoes. It's basically an industrial vulcanising solution, but it's really tough. It's great stuff for covering these up with. Now, putting the vulcanising solution or shoe glue on the outside there is a really good fix to make it a bit more of a permanent repair, but of course it is just a repair. It's never going to be as good as an original tyre, so you're going to have to monitor it, because from time to time maybe it's going to push its way out and you'll be left with that hole again, which of course means you're going to have to patch it all over again. Now, when you get home, as I explained, it's a really good idea if you can boot it from the inside. Now, there's a few different options for this. You can get specific tyre boots, or you can buy rubber like this in actual rolls and kits, especially for cutting down to your own size, which is what I tend to do. So really good rubber, and it mates really well with the inside lining of a tyre. But you have to make sure the tyre is completely clean on the inside. You have to give it a bit of a rough down as well, because otherwise the vulcanising solution really doesn't let it sit on there properly. And make sure it's completely set and completely dry before you go to reassemble it, because obviously you're going to have wet solution around this, so you have to make sure you do a proper job on it. Now, also, if it's such a substantial hole that you're not going to be able to plug it like this, for example, if it's on the sidewall of the tyre, near enough that's toast for your tyre and it's time to recycle that thing. However, you can, if you're persistent enough, get to work and stitch up the tyre sidewall. You can stitch it, you apply some vulcanising solution, or in this case, shoe goo on the outside of the tyre here, over the top to give those threads a bit of extra durability, and then boot it from the inside, and then you're going to be able to continue using your tyre as a tubeless tyre, at least for a few more months anyway. You might not get the whole life out of the tyre, but it's certainly better than binning the tyre and having to buy a fresh one. So there you go, it's that simple to plug a tubeless tyre, and of course don't forget you can make it more of a permanent fix by booting it from the inside and putting some glue on the top of it afterwards. Now it's up to you to monitor how much sealant's in your tyre, so I do advise you check from time to time, and of course make sure you get some decent tyre plugs. There's various different ones on the market. Keep them somewhere where you're going to get easy access to them, but just bear in mind that they're very sticky, so you don't want to get dusty because it's actually going to stop them working. So you want to try and keep these clean in a little pouch, something like that. For a couple more tubeless related videos, click down here for Tubeless 101. That is everything you need to know about setting tubeless, what sealants you need, what valves you need, how the system works. And click up here if you want to find out how to stitch up a tyre sidewall. That is the full video, and I'll show you all the detailed steps and all of the kit that you need to do to fix that. So there you go. If you like tubeless and you like fixing tubeless, give us a thumbs up and please subscribe to GMBN Tech.